Hey there, it's Imran and you're watching Imran Plus. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Ms.Marvel. The first two episodes are out on Disney Plus and I can't wait to dive into all of the fun stuff that we've gotten so far. As a Pakistani myself, watching Ms.Marvel has been an awesome experience because they have gotten so much right and have accurately represented so much of what makes part of being an American Pakistani teenager. This show is miles better than what any of us anticipated or expected in terms of representation and overall quality because the writing, directing, and acting in the show are top notch. I'm going to talk about it in the second half of my video, but I've included a link in the description box below to a Washington Post article which is about survivors sharing their experiences during the Partition, which episode 2 touches upon. I encourage everyone to read this article and be more informed about one of the bloodiest upheavals in human history that has had lasting impacts to this day. I think it's very important and I, again, encourage you to check out that link in the description below. Now, if you haven't watched episodes 1 or 2, pause this video, go ahead and watch those and then come back and join me for this discussion. I have really been enjoying this show so far and I want to make sure everyone gets the chance to experience it for themselves. And also, I will be talking about spoilers in this video, so consider yourself warned. Alright, so what do I like about this show? Overall, the writing and directing of this show are really well done and full of personality. That is the key word here, personality. This show is bursting with it. From really inventive shots to an authentic script that doesn't feel like it needs to explain any of the cultural references or significance to non-South Asian audiences. I have found myself silly grinning ear to ear throughout each of the 2 episodes that have been released so far. And that is a shout out to the directors and writers of this show. A big shout out especially to directors Adil Al-Arbi and Bilal Fallah, who knocked it out of the park with episode 1 and introduced the doodle animations throughout the show. The way this show depicts text conversations between characters is also brilliant, so cool, I love it. These types of details really are perfect for this show and dial up the zaniness and personality to an 11. Genius ideas that are very well executed. In the first 2 episodes, there are words and phrases and jokes that only someone who is South Asian or Muslim will understand, and none of these elements are ever translated or explained, which honestly I love because in a way I feel protective over them as a Pakistani myself, and so not explaining these references and jokes make them seem more intimate and personal, and it makes the show really something that is made with love and care by people who also identify with Kamala and her community. And I think if people find that boring, I'm okay with that because for every person who finds it boring, there is someone who is connecting with this material and these characters on a much more personal level. And again, that is props to directors Adil Al-Arbi, Bilal Fallah, and Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, as well as producer Sana Amanat and writer Bisha K. Ali, who brings humor and heart to every character in this show. Watching this show, to me, is a way for the South Asian diaspora to engage with their culture and experiences in a warm, cozy, larger-than-life way, and that is wonderful. I also love that Kamala makes YouTube videos about Avengers just like me. That was so awesome and so meta, I loved it, and I also thought Avengers Con was epic. Would I go to Avengers Con in real life? Absolutely, 100%. I actually wish we could have spent more time exploring all of the different merch and exhibits and cosplay because all of it was so well done. I really loved it. You know, Stranger Things actually has these pop-up stores where you can go in and interact with the different rooms. They're interactive and immersive, but on a smaller scale than their drive-in experiences. They are so much fun. I really think that Marvel should totally do an Avengers Con pop-up store. It would be perfect. I'm really also enjoying the score and music in Ms.Marvel. There are flares of South Asian melodies and instruments used like the sarangi, which call upon the rich and colorful musical history of South Asia. Laura Cartman is the composer and has worked on the scores for What If and Lovecraft Country, and she delivers here once again with a score that is unique, dynamic, and again, full of personality. This, Moon Knight, and Loki have been my favorite scores so far. Both episodes also feature music from South Asian artists which fit the vibe of the show very well. In fact, one of the songs is a Riz Ahmed song in the first episode called Deal With It, which I think is very, very, very well placed because this song comes from his recent album, The Long Goodbye. This album is a breakup album with one's country and tackles the struggle of being in a sort of no man's land when it comes to identity. And the song is played when Kamala is walking in her high school hallway, unable to fit in with all of the high school groups. And one of the teachers walks by and calls her by the wrong name completely. It's not really great. It's not a good experience. And it's also something that a lot of brown teenagers can call familiar. This is a theme about struggling to fit in that you'll find throughout this entire show. Kamala, like many Pakistani American teenagers, is in a no man's land between being American and being Pakistani. And on top of that, she's also a Muslim in a post 9/11 Islamophobic society, which comes with its own set of struggles. So she doesn't really know who she is, and as a result lives in a fantasy world where she can be herself. But the message of this show and of this song are to be unapologetically yourself. And I think that is something that the show is also demonstrating stylistically, which I think is really cool. So let's talk about how well this show has been representing South Asian culture. Firstly, what brown person can't relate to running errands and shopping in all of the Desi stores with their mom? I think that entire sequence of Kamala and her mom shopping was absolutely brilliant. I mean, to others, it probably was just a generic shopping sequence, a montage of scenes, but to me, and I'm pretty sure to other South Asian viewers, that was seeing your own personal life and life experiences projected on screen. I mean, they even included them stopping at halal food carts and mithai shops. Like, that is such a good attention to detail. And credit to Adil Al-Arbi and Bilal Fallah for knocking it out of the park with this sequence. They actually also directed the upcoming Batgirl movie, which include and feature halal shops in the background of Gotham City. And that, I think, is really, really cool. That's why having diverse talent in front of and behind the camera really makes a difference. Another great example is when Kamran and Kamala are discussing Bollywood movies and which Shah Rukh Khan movie is their favorite. That is an exact conversation I'm sure every single South Asian person has had in their life, sometimes multiple times. So I really love that too. I'm also very excited for Amir and Taisha's wedding because if that episode is anything like the first two episodes, then it's going to be a lot of fun because Desi weddings can be a blast. Yeah, these are all really brilliant elements that you really won't appreciate the layers of if you aren't Muslim or South Asian, which I think makes the show connect even better. This is the first time that a lot of people are watching brown characters in a positive light, so the way these things are depicted matters a lot more than you might think. And that's also why having these inside jokes that only brown people will get is good, because that never happens otherwise. This show is also a huge step for representation of Muslims, which in of itself is a nuanced discussion. But in the second episode, we spend a lot more time in Kamala's community, including the Masjid, which is a center point for community gatherings as well as Eid. I'm glad that they depict Kamala's family as practicing Muslims and that Kamala isn't ashamed of being Muslim. Her saying Bismillah before her driving test, Amr reciting Ayatul Kursi when he thinks she's possessed by a jinn, Kamala and Nakia attending the lecture at the Masjid, showing them focused in their prayer or namaz. These are all really great moments. And I like that these characters are engaged in their religion and their community. And Kamala's conversation with Nakia about the hijab, I thought, was also important to showcase that the hijab is a choice, and that Nakia says that she feels like herself when she's wearing the hijab, which I think is the first time I've ever heard a hijabi character in any media ever say something like that, and that is a big step forward. I also loved the entire Eid Mela sequence at the Masjid. It was so well done. You'd only appreciate it if you're a Muslim or have been to an Eid carnival or festival yourself. The part where they're categorizing the community into subgroups was hilarious and so spot on. Any Muslim can definitely relate to that sequence in particular. And also the Masjid shoe thief, that was so funny because it's something every Muslim person jokes about or talks about, and some have even experienced. So great moments. And I don't know if you caught it, but the shoe thief actually turned out to be the boy that Kamala saves at the end of the episode. Go back and watch that scene again and look at his shoes, and then go back and compare those with the shoes that Nakia puts in the cubby. They are the same, which I think is a really nice detail. I do wish though that they would be a little bit more clear to differentiate religion from culture. For example, when Kamala points out that the women's section of the Masjid needs improvement, I hope people don't interpret that as a fault in Islam and that Islam kind of mandates that, because that is not true. Rather, it's a cultural and societal fault, because Islam itself doesn't say anything about the women's section of the Masjid being less kept than the men's section. That is something that people and society have implemented. Some aspects of Kamala's life are treated well and with respect, and it's made clear that culture being conflated with religion is what causes these situations, not Islam itself. So many people have so many wrong ideas about Muslims and Islam as it is, and I hope this show is a way to show them Islam in a more positive and authentic light instead. Speaking of representing Islam, I was actually surprised and glad to see a somewhat honest depiction of how government agencies treat Muslim communities and how they view them. The Department of Damage Control agent that we first met in Spider-Man No Way Home actually talks about how the FBI is already surveilling mosques and Muslims, which is true in real life and has caused some very serious damages within families and communities that are innocent. And I think I appreciate the show mentioning that and talking about how that is a real problem. It's a sensitive topic, but I hope that the show continues to shed a light on the reality of what being a Muslim in America is like. Let's talk about some of the plot elements. I am so glad to see that Kamala's family is not stereotyped here. Initially, I was worried that this show would make her parents seem strict and unkind. Thankfully though, that is not the case, largely due to the behind the camera talent being South Asian and Muslim, as well as the actors giving an authentic performance. Her parents are depicted in a positive and loving light, not as Kamala's enemy, but instead are charming, lovable, and relatable. Amir also is a great guy and is rocking a full beard just like he does in the comics, which I think is great. This series seems to be exploring Kamala's relationship with her mother in particular, and I think that Zenobia Shroff is doing an excellent job playing Kamala's mother in this series. The scene where her parents present her with the Hulk costume was really touching because their parents really made an attempt to connect with their daughter who is in a weird place culture and identity wise, and they were excited to do so. And I'm glad that in episode 2 we see Kamala take some ownership and apologize for sneaking out and hurting her parents. And that leads hope that over the course of this series, Kamala comes to embrace her family as a strength and not something that holds her back. How cool would it be if we had a superhero who had their family and parents as their backbone? Usually that role is filled by love interest, but I think it would be awesome if Kamala's parents and family became that for her. Speaking of relationships and family, I'm very surprised that this show is discussing the partition and its lasting effects on the South Asian diaspora. The partition is such a multi-dimensional and devastating event in history that I don't think a lot of people are educated enough about. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, it is one of the most deadliest upheavals in human history. Entire families were uprooted, millions of people died, and tens of millions of people were displaced, all just a couple of generations ago. This isn't ancient history because people that survived the partition are still alive today. And again, I've included a link to that Washington Post article. Please go ahead and check it out and read more about the significance of the partition. Back to Ms.Marvel, Kamala's family, like most South Asian families, have stories and experiences from the partition and its aftermath. And it also seems that her powers are related to that history, which is different from the comics. This change makes her powers more personal in my opinion, and based on what I shared with you in my trailer breakdown, the villains in this series are also connected to that history. So check out my breakdown video if you're interested in learning more about what's coming. Now, I can understand people being upset with this change. Her powers in the comics played a crucial role visually and figuratively in Kamala's journey of self-acceptance, but if you're not a huge fan or if you haven't read the comics, then this change isn't a big loss because her new powers are just as personal by being tied to her identity and family history. I mean, it's definitely fair to be unhappy with the change, and it is a valid criticism because I do think that if they had tried hard enough, then they could have made the original powers work in this series. But at the same time, the MCU makes these kind of massive changes to their characters all the time. Sometimes characters are unrecognizable from their comic book counterparts, and that's just the reality of how the MCU adapts certain storylines and characters. So I guess for me, this change so far doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the show, even though the change is not totally necessary and does distance this iteration of Kamala from the comics. At the end of the day, this version of Kamala is so far a big step for representation, positive representation, and in my opinion, a win for Disney+. These MCU shows seem to work much better when they are focused on a specific character and are not as large a scale as the movies are. For example, after having rewatched all of the Disney Plus shows, I think Hawkeye is my favorite Disney Plus show so far, and from the first 2 episodes, I believe Ms.Marvel is on track to beat that. As of now, it's tied with Hawkeye because there are still more episodes left to watch, and so things could change, but I really am enjoying it so far. I'm very excited for what's next, and I can't wait to talk about it with you soon. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a great time. Please let me know if you enjoyed this video and if you would like more of these types of weekly breakdowns for episodes in the future. Lots more videos coming soon, but in the meantime, make sure you like this video and subscribe. Click the bell icon so you don't miss any upcoming videos. And don't forget to share this video with your friends and fellow movie enthusiasts. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.